joining. Obviously, welcome to DeFi Live. And today we're talking about our side chains, the answer to gas fees. Obviously joined by a very esteemed and well-knowledgeable panel, people that I've known in the industry for a little while, and some of them meeting for the first time. So first, do a little round of introductions to make sure we know everybody, and we'll get underway. So first we have Jay from Avalanche. Say hi.
Hey everyone, Jay, VP of Marketing at Avalabs here, building Avalanche, the Layer 1 protocol.
And we have also Daniel from DeversiFi.
Hi guys, I'm Dan from DeversiFi. I'm a CEO and co-founder, and DeversiFi is a DeFi hub built on Layer 2 by Starkware.
Amazing. And last we got Michael from Pillar. Good to see you again, Michael.
Good to see you too, Jay. I'm Michael Messele. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Pillar. Pillar is a smart wallet, and we also have Etherspot, which is a smart wallet service packaged as an SDK for everyone to integrate with.
Amazing. And lastly, my name is Jeff Hancock. I'm CEO, co-founder of CoinPass.com. We are actually a centralized cryptocurrency exchange based here in the UK. And we're talking about gas fees on-chain in DeFi. So first of all, wait for the siren to pass. There we go. And first of all, I'm going to go kind of around the stream. Jay, we'll start with you. Tell us in your words, in what you think is the current climate and the state of play for DeFi and NFTs, where gas fees are related from maybe from a user point of view.
Yeah, right now for gas fees and DeFi, and I think just Layer 1s in general, it's not as grim as people may be making it seem. Is my take at this point. I've been professionally within the crypto and blockchain space since 2015. So within that time span, with kind of the critical focus that pretty much any crypto professional has in the space once they're working in it, you kind of see the ups and downs of all of the gas fees. So Ethereum, I think, was of course the first and only chain for a while that was experiencing that, and it seemed like that was the only choice. But of course, crypto innovates very quickly, and there are now other choices, whether that be Layer 2, other Layer 1s, gas mitigation processes that are created on the application level, all these different types of options. So now I think that the user has plenty of choice. It's just a matter of perhaps education and awareness, and that's where we are now.
And similarly, Dan, what you guys do at DeversiFi, how are you dealing with the current climate, and what are your opinion on how people view high gas fees, or high gas fees, as we say?
Yeah, sure. So I guess for the kind of like users that are already in the space, for a lot of people, they kind of slowly become kind of priced out of using DeFi on Ethereum. And so we see people looking for alternatives. There is kind of like, this kind of like diaspora maybe away from Ethereum, people kind of trying to save themselves. And it is interesting to see kind of kind of trade-offs and decisions people are happy to make. And we've seen some solutions that have become very successful, like Polygon. I think has been kind of the first maybe like gas safe haven for people. And yeah, kind of like other people kind of looking to find a safe haven from that. And that's of course has spawned the existence of a lot of Layer 2s and other chains. I think what is also interesting is that that's kind of the case for existing users. For new users, people who are new to the space, don't necessarily have that background or necessarily ties to Ethereum. So probably more and more users will be kind of like native to a Layer 2 or native to Avalanche or something like that, and they won't necessarily have to touch the expensive chains, even if their security is somehow related to that.
And Michael, with Pillar, with your wallet and your ecosystem that Pillar have built, are you finding that your users are steering in sort of different directions based on gas fees because they're kind of solely responsible for it? They're not dealing with a larger exchange kind of fronting a lot of that complexity for?
No doubt, especially when you deal with smart wallets. Smart wallets give you other aspects like account recovery and being able to put in a sub account, a mini account, so that you can use it as your contactless card, etc. But the biggest barrier is the installation of that wallet, because you don't just get it like a key-based wallet. You have to install it. When you install it on the Layer 1 mainnet, then there's a huge gas fee. The more the gas price goes, sometimes it becomes a massive barrier to adoption. In fact, then couple that with the fact that when you get involved in some of the DeFi protocols again, when you stake, etc., you have to pay because you have to use their contracts again, and it costs you an awful lot of. So it becomes almost an inner member kind of thing, where experienced users, the ones that have made some gains, can afford it. Newcomers and those that want to experiment get excluded. So gas fee to me is something serious that we have to deal with.
And that brings us to a really nice little segue there about UX, about how users interact in this space. There are some very slick UIs out there, and there's still some very, more, let's be nice, antiquated solutions that do work, but they require, just as you said, Jay, a huge amount of education. What do you think is kind of the sweet spot in the middle for UX and usability in terms of onboarding more users that are willing to ignore those high gas fees? Michael, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, I will actually tell you a storyline on this one, because for newcomers, gas is an issue. Even if it was 1 cent, 2 cents, a new person would say, "Yeah, I've just done my eBay and I didn't have to pay," because they compare it with their Web2 experience.
Yeah.
Not only do I ask them to pay, I'm asking them to pay a lot more. And even worse, when they get in, I'm saying to them, "Okay, this is this Polygon, this is Avalanche, all the other side chains that they have to know about." But as a Web2 user, when I use Twitter, I can't care less whether Twitter uses SQL Server, GraphQL, MySQL, Oracle. It's none of my business. I don't care. I just want to use the service. So we have to be able to abstract away those kind of things.
Right.
In fact, in a recent collaboration with Collabland is a Discord token getting service, which is being used by big TV networks right now in terms of their NFT distributions. In our proof of concept, what we did was we integrated the smart wallet services with their bots. So users no longer have to go in. When they have an airdrop, they just follow a link, use their email to log in. Then they just type in on the chat box, send NFT. Then because their account is sub-controlled by the bot sends it. So when you talk about earlier on centralized, maybe the concept of progressive decentralization is key for the newcomers, in
Yeah.
that you get them on, as they get experience, they go to the configuration panel and say, "Okay, now bot, I don't want you to own my account," or they can leave this account, create another sub-account. Just like, again, like our contactless card, which is risky, but which is convenient.
Yeah.
So
So we're talking about a fine balance in there between risk and convenience, and I think that happens with a lot of things we're trying to build in this space. And Jay, probably similar with what you experienced with your protocol. What are some of the UX advantages that you've seen from either your own deployments or other competitors that you think are helping the space?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Michael was saying in terms of abstraction, especially for the users that don't care. For the users that do care, allow them to look under the hood. And I think that's been the same way across Web 2 as well, for the most part. When it comes to our deployments at Avalabs, Avalanche was something that we've been working on for quite some time and only has really launched a little over a year ago. And the main focus was UX the entire time. And of course, we can have places to improve, but by UX prioritization, what do I mean? So it's transaction fees, mitigate that as much as possible so the barrier of entry isn't as high. Another one is performance, or in more technical terms, transaction finality, and throughput, I guess, is another kind of secondary to that too. And finality is really important because you have instant gratification, or that culture for instant gratification. And of course, we've all probably sent numerous transactions on ETH and have waited and waited and also have that kind of kickback. And we know that experience, and that's probably fine for us on the screen and maybe some of the people tuning in. But for the most part, the newcomers, that's not okay. You have the concept of bounce rate for Web2 pages. And why does that exist? Well, it's because the idea that a page loads beyond 5-10 seconds is an unacceptable concept for most people. So similarly, that's kind of another approach. And the last point is all of these value props, don't really matter unless the point from A to Z isn't as direct as it can be. So I think that's where the collective space is moving towards, because right now, even with Avalanche, if you want to interact with it, the tooling hasn't really caught up yet. So you have to use MetaMask, you have to plug it in with a custom RPC, then you have to get coins off of some obscure exchange if you're, especially if you're in the US, et cetera, et cetera. So the list goes on and on. And so I think that's now where the team has shifted its focus, saying, all right, well, UX on the layer one protocol side is pretty strong. Now, how can we make sure that that stays true with the infrastructure tools? I think that's one sector that needs to also catch up. And then the other one is I guess liquidity. So how fast can someone get from point A to point B? In this state, you still have to start from fiat. So hopefully in some future it'll kind of circumvent that. But for now, those are the kind of the things that we have to deal with when it comes to UX design.
Yeah, and I suppose on the UX side, especially for pardon me, especially with Dan here, you know, just while we're on the stream, I'm able to go to DeversiFi. I can, you know, click on the connect my wallet, and I've got MetaMask in my, you know, in my browser, so I can, you know, directly connect. Do you feel that, you know, where you've taken that kind of edge of making it super clean, showing people only what they need to see, are you finding that the user adoption rate is higher, or are you still only really attracting the intermediate and upwards users?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think we're kind of now in this process of trying to reach kind of like a wider audience of users. And what the one thing that is kind of like frustrating with wallets is that your experience as a product depends on a third party that you don't have control over. And so we can kind of like do as much as we can do to make that experience nice. But at the end of the day, you know, you are interacting with MetaMask. And, you know, MetaMask is very popular and people use it. One could argue is not like the best user experience. And also kind of weird things happen with wallet interactions sometimes, you know, like transactions are like dropped or things don't appear or whatever.
Yes, very generous remark.
Yeah. And then people would come to support and be like, hey, this is broken, it doesn't work. And you're like, yeah.
It's not us, yeah.
But at the same time, it's like you can't tell yourself it's not my problem, it's not us, because it's your product, right?
Yeah, no, you want to. We're all educators in space. We want to bring people in.
Yeah.
And it's these sort of, you know, I'm not saying MetaMask is centralized, but it's one of these applications that does have a huge amount of connections out to other platforms, which is a really, really good thing. But it is one of those little bit of holdback bits. You know, I recently, just to, you know, add to your point as well, I recently found, you know, through my old wallets, a whole bunch of Omisigo tokens, which are kind of stuck. And, you know, I can't find any really up-to-date relevant information to get those tokens off. So there is still, you know, a bit of a disjoin there where we need to almost support each other. We need to help people with their MetaMask issue to get onto our platform to experience DeFi as we know it. And just to touch back on something you said there, Jay, as well about liquidity segmentation across different solutions and different chains. We saw this in a very centralized way where Tether was putting different tokens across different chains and burning it here and re-adding it here. And from a user experience, people want to get into the latest token or the latest meme coin or latest NFT or whatever it is, but they have to kind of know well in advance of that journey from, as you say, A to Z, from fiat onto Ethereum or onto Polygon. You know, what are some of the things that layer 2 can do to kind of solve those kind of liquidity segmentation issues?
Sorry, is that to me first?
Yeah, you first.
Cool. I mean, I think, let's see, maybe it's a little bit broader than that, but on the protocol level, I mean, perhaps all of the performance components that I was highlighting earlier, that those could always be improved. I think there's going to be a point. So Avalanche settles transactions in under a second, and we were talking about this as a team. There's going to be a point where, let's say you keep fine tuning that statistic, it's not going to matter too much to other people. So people are going to look for other reasons why they should be using the chain. And again, it kind of ties all the way back to UX every single time. It's just always going to be that way. And so I think in terms of the way you can mitigate that, focused on gas fees first and foremost, is really simplifying that language. I was actually thinking about this yesterday. I took cash out of an ATM, and Michael, to your analogy about eBay, I think one similar thing is, or maybe a similar analogy on the other side of the spectrum, is when you take out cash from an ATM, you're paying effectively gas fees. In my mind, you're at least one or $2.
Paid ones in London, yeah, the big ones.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm based in New York, so maybe we're surrounded by paid. So
Yeah.
that experience is familiar. So I was thinking a little bit. I was like, well, I know gas fees kind of is used very frequently as transaction fees, but it seems like the space uses gas for reasons that make sense in the context of the technical term. But maybe for the simple or the kind of newly initiated user or the newcomer, it makes more sense to just use everyday language. And I think crypto, for better or for worse, seems to create new terminology on a day-to-day basis. But when you lift under the hood, you're all of a sudden like, oh wait, well, yield farming is almost like a kickback from the protocol. That's kind of like the best way I describe it to people. And so when you talk about yield farming, that just makes it so much more esoteric. So maybe that's kind of why I'm stretching this out a little bit and saying, well, maybe what can be done from the culture perspective is really to help people on board with simpler terminology and think critically as to what makes most sense for people to know and what doesn't make sense. And kind of the last thing I'll say about that is, imagine all of our respective journeys down the rabbit hole. You started with Bitcoin and then you understood what blockchain was, and think about the stories you told along the way. I remember when I first got into Bitcoin, I would go under the hood and say, "Oh, well, this protocol it uses proof of work, and let me explain to you what that means." Also, do
It
you know
becomes
Satoshi
overly
Nakamoto?
technical. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe we don't need to tell those lengthy stories for those that come into the space newly. Maybe we can make that as brief as possible. And to kind of close it in the final statement here is, that's basically the statement I said about the A to Z point with UX. It's like UX relates to storytelling, how to onboard people. It also relates to how you experience the protocol, which we kind of covered earlier too.
And I think that kind of comes into something you said as well, Michael, about progressive decentralization. I mean, when we talk about crypto, we're also, and we're in this room and the people in the audience as well. Make sure the people in the audience be writing your questions down. We're going to do a Q&A in just a few minutes as well. Is the people we're bringing in and the culture we're kind of portraying. When it comes to culture, everybody's different. Everyone has different needs. They're very interested in crypto because it's brand new, but they might not know anything about the existing financial system. I know that from my own journey, when we're talking about this, I've learned more about traditional finance at the same time I'm learning about crypto and seeing the good things that it can do. And when it comes to that kind of progressive decentralization, pardon me, Dan, what are you kind of seeing from that kind of culture-wise, I suppose, on your user base that are engaging with you? They obviously have to have a little bit of front-end knowledge to come and use your platform. But in terms of that kind of progressive step, are they onboarding onto kind of one type of product and then moving over to more advanced stuff later? What are you kind of seeing in the space from a culture?
Yeah, sure. So I think kind of like to iterate your point, one of the kind of like biggest tricks right now is to use more accessible terminology because as we want to grow our audience, the way we message people like also has to change, and yield farming isn't a term that makes sense to anyone. And I think there definitely is a progression in terms of the things that people use. Firstly, I guess people would kind of start with just simple swapping of tokens and then progress into kind of like more extravagant things like lending and then maybe even yield farming. Although in terms of speaking to people who are outside of crypto, I think the most interesting value proposition, I think kind of the gateway drug to DeFi would be yield on stable coins. Because if you tell someone like, hey, you can come and you can trade these coins, they go up and down, and like you have to do a lot of research, they're like, okay, that seems scary. But if you're like, hey, do you want to get 8% interest on your USD? They're like, okay, yes, that sounds like the first step for me.
It's accessible global finance with a level playing field. That's how I like explaining it. Some of these, you can get 8 to 10% yield or interest on funds, but you usually have to do it with a very big fund with at least $1 million because they have to do KYC, they have to do the fund management paperwork, and there's an upfront cost to that. And that's where smart contracts takes all of that stuff out. And the £10 user has the same advantage as a £1 million user. So that's what I like specifically about it. Same question for Michael, about this progressive decentralization. Are you guys going to be moving more towards supporting as many changes as possible, or is it about bringing your users on the journey to kind of get them into the ecosystem?
I mean, we're tackling it, as I said, with EtherSpot, which is the infrastructure level. We've gone multi-chain, at least on the side chains. We support all the side chains. But with the other collaborations, because we can do with the smart contract SDK level support, we can create sub accounts. So with those sub accounts, we can authorize a third party to have access to that account. So that's what effectively enables the bots in this case to send on your behalf. So that as a user, as a newcomer, you do not need to know about gas price. You do not need to know about installing a browser plugin or anything. You just type in your Discord channel, the chat box, type in send, mint, whatever to, and it gets it off your address book and sends it on your behalf. So this is making it easier, but the progressiveness is you have the choice to disable it or to create an alternative so that you're not stuck with it. So the more experienced you get, then you realize the self-sovereignty aspect of crypto. Because I'll give you an example. My niece recently was telling me she was on holiday. She bought her ETH for 1,800 on Robinhood, and she sold it for 4.1k, and she went on holiday with it. Now, that gives me the average person who's not interested in the decentralized aspect, but who's looking at it as an investment opportunity. But through getting them this progressive decentralization, you can educate them in the process. Hang on a minute, why not take control of my own financial destiny? And
Yeah.
this is the aspect we're looking at.
Exactly. Yeah. Self-control and sovereignty of your assets, sovereignty of their financial education, wealth, really. It opens up so many doors. And I think that's why culture-wise, and I bring back the culture, there is something for everybody in this space, whether it's, getting some yield, whether it's, investing and trading, working with volatile assets, or getting just, a good return on their capital. We're seeing US dollars printed out the wazoo. We're seeing real inflation hit. Post-Brexit stuff. I mean, everyone's going to be out there looking after themselves, right? And I suppose one of the last points I want to get into, and I kind of left this point for last, because I think we're all going to have slightly different views on this, is what's the end game, really, when it comes to DeFi, when it comes to, on-chain gas fees, what we're talking about? Is it going to be a race to the bottom, or is it going to be best product wins, and people are going to be willing to pay for it? I'll start with you, Dan.
Sure. So I think in terms of I guess starting from the consumer side, what the end game looks like, I think, the point is in whatever, 3 to 5 years, users will open their favorite financial app. In Europe, maybe a lot of people are familiar with Revolut. I don't know what it is in the States. And then essentially to the user, it probably wouldn't be that different from kind of what it is now from an experience, different opportunities, better opportunities because it's powered by DeFi in the background. But in terms of where the kind of the fee game is going, I think I wouldn't say it's a race to the bottom. I think we have seen that kind of play out a little bit already, where I wouldn't say that the most successful products so far are the cheapest. If we kind of look at the kind of first wave of crypto with centralized exchanges, maybe the most popular ones are, let's say, Coinbase for the wider adoption of users. Definitely not the cheapest. And kind of the other leaders also make a lot of funds on it, a lot of money from it. In DeFi, we actually see that a lot of DeFi products have higher fees than non-DeFi products. Like the likes of kind of Uniswap or SushiSwap, whatever, would have higher fees than their centralized counterparts. So I think people are kind of happy to pay for the product that they use. Of course, there are market principles at play. So as the industry matures, probably at some point, we will reach a point where no kind of actor in the space extracts disproportional value. Right. But yeah, I wouldn't say that it's a lowest fees win. I think fees are a hygiene factor. So for example, Ethereum is now too expensive. Some scaling solutions, let's say, reduce cost by 10x, not enough. Paying $5 to send money around, still not. That's not doable. But I think below a certain hygiene factor, it doesn't kind of really matter anymore. Especially as we can have, I guess, kind of application specific layers. So if you're sending billions of dollars around, maybe paying Ethereum fees is fine. If you're playing a game, maybe a different layer makes more sense for that kind of security, speed, cost trade-off.
Yeah. And yeah, Jay, same thing. What do you think it's going to be? Is it a race to the bottom? Is it app specific for particular sectors of the space?
I don't think it's a race to the bottom, but I think what we're seeing with anything that grows this quickly or any type of market is that's growing is you're going to see consolidation. And right now, I think the last maybe 5 years or so, a lot of the L1s were coming and trying to provide alternatives to users. And exactly what was mentioned earlier, it was saying, well, it's not like these chains necessarily have to, I don't know, I guess there's not like a zero sum effectively. And that's where there might be different use cases. And also, simply put, people aren't going to think or make decisions in the most rational way for many different reasons. Maybe there's a brand that makes most sense to someone. Maybe there is a peer recommendation, something as arbitrary as that. And so the list goes on and on and on as to how you discover these different products. So what I think is happening now is the kind of 5 year time span. A lot of L1s are focused on, all right, here's our value propositions, here's what's better. Utility matters perhaps to early adopters because I think people and tend to dig a little bit deeper because it just requires a lot more research and overhead in terms of time. But now we're in a space where there's that core foundational group that's basically able to guide people in. Those are people like us who've been in the space for a while, people who are watching who've been in the space for a while, those types of groups. And now all of a sudden you're switching the script a little bit, or maybe not switching, but including this component. And this is where I'm kind of putting my marketing hat on, but you're including this brand element. And there's no accident that the biggest brands in crypto, FTX, Binance, Coinbase, they're all now getting into the brand space. Brand is really important because that's what's going to emotionally convince someone to choose one over the other. And so that's where one, I guess, brand level example is with FTX. They have a lot of sponsorships in sports. So imagine if you're watching motorsports, for example, and you have that association of fast and maybe cool and maybe victorious if you have a team that wins, and that loosely gets associated with your product decision. That's kind of where we're at right now, and that's why I think no, I don't think it's zero sum. And then I also think because of kind of the brand complexities that are involved now, it's going to be this game where people, especially protocols and projects, will have to compete at that level to make sure that they can get market share.
Really cool. And lastly, Michael, do you think it's a race to the bottom or chain specific, app specific?
I don't think it's race to the bottom. I concur with the other gents here. But what I see is it would be use case driven and depending on the segment that you have targeted. Say, for instance, if I have an NFT worth 500K, I probably do not mind paying a couple of $100 on the mainnet to transact that.
Right.
If I'm using an NFT which I've just gotten and is worth, say, $10, I'm not interested in paying gas price. So depending on use cases and why I'm accessing a specific service for what purpose will drive where I would reside in terms of how I put my assets and how I transact with them. So it would be as services develop and progress, that will determine where people would gravitate towards.
Really, really cool. And I suppose lastly, we've got just a few more minutes here. I'm going to see if there's any questions in the chat. It doesn't look like we have any at the moment, but we've got a few minutes. If you want to ask any of the attendees on the panel, if you want to ask him a question, please hit me up. Damn it, I've just closed the window. Too many live streams going at the same time. What a rookie error. I apologize. And lastly, for a last one for Dan, what do you think is next? I suppose for your space, in that DEX space, what do you think is going to be next for solving that scalability problem? You have a trading zero gas fee component to your platform. Is there going to be a layer 2 that's going to be more highly integrated to your platform to be able to introduce new assets or move them off to other platforms?
Sure. So I think what's the next kind of interesting step is how layer 2s work with each other. So, we launched on our own layer 2 a year ago. Then kind of the state of technology was such that, our layer only has our app on it. Now we are seeing kind of layer 2s launching like Optimism, Arbitrum, soon Starknet, which kind of allow, they're Turing complete. They allow for kind of the whole DeFi infrastructure to exist on them. So I think the next step is to see how these kind of all work together and how liquidity fragmentation happens or hopefully liquidity fragmentation doesn't happen. And I think one of the possible ways of it going is if you have a suite of products on a layer 2, they kind of essentially provide aggregated access to the deepest liquidity pools, which will be kind of on layer 1. So that's kind of one of the maybe shorter term kind of ways in which we'll see this. Of course, the alternative that maybe Jay's more interested in is all of DeFi happens on one layer 1, and we don't have that problem. But it would be, I think that's kind of like the next challenge. It would be interesting to see how that plays out over the next year.
Amazing. So kind of amazing timing there, right? We're going to wrap it up there. I want to thank all of my panelists for joining us today on talking about gas fees and sidechains. Daniel from DeversiFi, Michael from Pillar, and Jay from Avalabs. I want to thank you guys for contributing to DeFi Live, and I hope all of our audience found it insightful, and everyone have an amazing day.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.